So continuing off that way, one thing to note is that sort of in terms of applying themes in PowerPoint, all of them are located in the themes group on sort of our design tab, right? And one thing to note is that themes can generally be sort of applied or changed at any time. Well, why is this important? Well, it's just helpful, right? Let's say we do the content for our slide and we started out with a specific theme, but as we've sort of worked on it, we're kind of like, maybe I don't like this, or maybe I think this slideshow needs a different sort of spin to it. Well, that's great, right? Because we can simply click it or switch it with a click of a button, right? Which is frankly very convenient. It also allows us to even just test different themes very quickly, see what works, what doesn't, what we like, what we don't like, right? And that's pretty easy to do. So if we remember, in order to apply a theme, what do we need to do? We select the Design tab on the ribbon and then locate the Themes group. Each image represents a theme. So we then click the More drop-down arrow to see all available themes. And we select the desired theme, right, that we want, of course, depending on what we want. And then again, the theme will be sort of applied to the entire presentation. And to apply a different theme, you simply just select it from the Design tab. So let's just show you what this would look like. So again, let's go Design. Let's go to Themes. Something like this, right? Maybe something like this, right? And as you can see, we're just changing the theme every time. Pretty straightforward, right? Nothing too crazy. Pretty easy to understand, thankfully. Moving on. So now we're talking about transitions. Now, this is another sort of, I guess, knowledge question. But what are transitions in PowerPoint? Does anyone know? Has anyone worked with transitions, right? So this is a simpler question. So again, we'll just give it 2 minutes. But what are transitions in PowerPoint? And what do they aim to do, everybody? What do we think? We'll give it 2 minutes. But again, the question is, what are transitions in PowerPoint? And what sort of value do they provide a user, or sorry, a user of PowerPoint? And what sort of value does it provide to the audience? Everyone, what do we think? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? Of course, transitions are very popular, right? But what sort of value does it provide to sort of users of PowerPoint? Why would Microsoft create such a feature, everyone? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? All right, let's come back, right? So it's a very good question. I'm sure we know what transitions are, right, in slideshows, right? And basically, transitions is more of a general concept to just indicate some state of change, right? In the context of PowerPoint, the state of change that we're most likely very familiar with is what we call slide transitions, right? And what slide transitions are, they're sort of a simple sort of special effect between each slide, right? That sort of I guess is eye-catching and sort of breaks the monotony of like this. Like if we look, you see how it's like kind of boring, right? So it bridges the gap between the two slides in sort of a, how do I say this? Like in a very visually pleasing manner, right? So a transition really sky's the limit, right? In terms of what PowerPoint offers us, right? It can be just simply fading from one slide into another, or something very flashy or an eye-catching effect, like the whole slide turning over or like rolling into a new one, right? And sort of PowerPoint makes it really, really easy for us, thankfully, to apply transitions to some or all of our slides, which does tend to give our presentation a very polished and sort of professional look. However, however, and we will mention this, but I did want to ask a question. What sort of problem do we think one could run into when applying a lot of transitions to our presentation? What sorts of, I guess, problems or issues do you think we would run into as a user or as a viewer when we apply too many transitions to our slideshow, everyone? And now this is a very, I guess this is a very good question that I'd like to ask my class anytime I cover PowerPoint, because it does sort of, it may not be directly related to PowerPoint, but it does give you sort of a little bit of knowledge on to how to create better PowerPoints, right? So let's give it 2.5 minutes to really think about this question. But what do we think the issue or the potential issue is with sort of um, using using too many transitions in our PowerPoint? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? What are the potential issues that arise when we use too many transitions in our PowerPoint? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? What are sort of the issues that we foresee happening? What do you think, everyone? What do we think, everyone? What are sort of the issues with applying transitions? What do you think? What are the issues? What do we think, everyone? Well, oops, didn't turn on. So I guess the reason why is if we put too many transitions, it actually serves to the detriment of our presentation. Well, why is that the case? Well, because it's very, very visually distracting, right? You may lose your audience's attention when you're presenting because they're too busy just being off put by the transitions. Also, it could sort of be deemed somewhat unprofessional as well because of how distracting it is, right? So that's another thing to consider when you're using transitions, that you always want to use them, but you also want to make sure that you're not overusing them. That the use of the transitions is done with sort of in a tasteful manner, right? And now, in terms of the types of three categories of transitions to choose from all of which can be found in the transitions tab. We have subtle, so this is the most basic types of transitions. They use simple animations between slides. Exciting, they use more complex animations to transition between slides, while they're more visually interesting than subtle transitions. Adding too many can make your presentation look less professional. However, when used in moderation, they can add a nice touch between important slides. Finally, we have dynamic content, so for transitioning between two slides that use similar slide layouts, dynamic transitions will move only the placeholders and not the slides themselves. So when used correctly, dynamic transactions can help unify your slides and add a further level of polish um, to our presentation. Now, I got a question. So let's think about this from sort of a professional perspective. Um, let's say we work for a company and they want us to do a PowerPoint presentation. What sort of transitions, if we are to use transitions, do you think we somewhat want to focus on, everyone? We'll give this 2 minutes to really think about, well, which transitions, if we are going to use them, do you think we should be using? What do we think, everyone? Which sorts of transitions should we really be focusing on or emphasizing? What do we think? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? What do we think? Well, I think generally the best would be subtle, right? Because it's not very distracting. It does make your transitions look cleaner without doing too much. Even dynamic content to an extent, you could argue, since it sort of simulates a sort of less distracting transition between the slides. But I definitely think that using the exciting style of transitions is way too much, right? Because it's very distracting. There's a lot going on, and we will see what the exciting category of transitions look like, and you will quickly see why, right? It's very distracting. To apply a transition is very easy. We just select the desired slide from the slide navigation pane, and then click the transitions tab. Then we locate to the transition to this slide group, right? And by default, none is applied, right? Because at the moment, we haven't really specified a transition, right? Cool. And then we click the more drop down arrow to display all the transitions. Then we click a transition to apply it to the selected slide. This will automatically preview the transition. Then we can use the apply to all command in the timing group to apply the same transition to all slides in our presentation. But we do want to keep in mind that this will modify any other transitions we've applied. So generally, we want to apply a few types of transitions to various slides in our presentation. And we may find that some transitions do end up working better than others, depending on our content of our slides. So let's look at this, right? Let's go to transitions here. We have our list. We can look at subtle, so morph, right? Again, very subtle, right? Even push is a very professional looking transition. Even this, right? Split. You get the point, right? It's very, very non-distracting. Now, look, we see with exciting, we're seeing like, hopefully it shows it. Again, a lot more movement involved, a lot more visually distracting, right? Even something like this is frankly a little bit absurd, right? You can see why in sort of professional context, why didn't this show? There we go, right? In a professional context is not really what we want to be doing, right? Very, very distracting, right? Even that, the zoom might be okay, but like even stuff like this, too much, right? Whereas let's look at dynamic content. So let's just show the purpose. Let's duplicate this slide and then, right? So let's just go, let's go Ferris wheel, right? Let's move this up. Or actually, no, it's like this. Yeah. So look, like if we go, or sorry, preview, right? Or maybe this is better. So you see, like that's also very good, right? Because it's very natural. So let me just preview it again. So this is our first slide. So look, right? So if we're using a similar layout, it does sort of mesh the gap, right? And transition does look a lot cleaner. But again, these sort of exciting effects, like, dude, it's a lot, right? It's a bit much, really. And frankly, it's very, very distracting. It's very easy to see why it's that distracting, right? And then again, we can click apply to all if we want to sort of, if we do want to apply it to every slide. Where is it? Apply to all, right? And yeah. So to preview a transition, of course, as I just shown, we can click on sort of the preview tab, right? And then, or you could just click on the play animations tab on that star, right? That's another thing we can also do should we want to, right? So that's pretty useful there. It's pretty good. Moving on, we can also modify. So one thing is, yes, we can add transitions, right? That's cool. But what we can also do is sort of change the way the transition works, right? I mean, in all honesty, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel, right? It's relatively simple, I'd say, right? But you can, for a lot of sort of slide transitions or a decent bit, we can change the behavior, right? So certain slides may have the effect options, whereas with other slides, some of them might be grayed out, like you can't do it. But for example, this push effect, we could change it to go maybe go from the bottom to the left side, or go from the right side, or go from the top, right? Depending on sort of the transition you select, right? And again, it'll change, and a preview of the transition will appear, right? Another thing to note is that some transitions don't let you modify the direction, right? Which is something I noted, right? So it really depends. But let's go here. Let's add a simple push. Right, let's do wipe. Wipe will probably have one. So we see the wipe, and then we can change sort of the direction. So like from bottom right, top left, from left, right? Pretty cool. Let's see. Let's try to find one that doesn't have one. No, this has one. That has one. Cut has one. Flash, maybe? Yes. So Flash doesn't have one because it's default. So we can see it's grayed out, right? But most should have some sort of, I guess, like, how do we say it? Like, effect options, right? It's very rare that it won't. right? But here's another one we changed it from vertical to horizontal. But yeah, that's how you sort of modify the behavior. Of course, it's not massive changes, but there are changes that you can make regardless there, right? So because of that, it is important to note that you can sort of have that change to behavior occur. And now, one thing we can do is we have the ability to modify our transition duration, right? So we can select a slide with the transition we want to modify, and then we get a list of settings in the timing group, right? So if we want to make a transition very fast, or we want it to drag out, which honestly I wouldn't recommend it, you want to make sure your transitions are relatively quick, right? You don't want it to sort of linger around longer than it really should. Um, so there is that. But we can change it. So again, go to the timing group and enter the desired time for the transition. In this example, you could do it to like half a second or to make the transition faster. So if we just go back here, right, we look, see it's 140, let's change it to 0.75 or like a 3/4 of a second. Look, it's much faster, right? So let's increase this a lot as well just to show you, and you see how it slowly goes. So that's another option. Uh, in all honesty, I don't see a reality where you need to change the duration to a longer amount. More often than not, you're just going to want to sort of have it relatively quick. And what I mean by that is quick enough to not drag on, but also slow enough so they can see the transition happen. It's not a flash. But yeah, and above that, there are also other sort of changes we can make um, to our transitions. One note, I do believe I did mention a couple sort of sections ago that we could sort of change, like we could have our slides transition based on a timer, right? Like advance after like say 40 seconds, right? And that also, while we're here, I did want to mention there's an advanced slide section here, and then on mouse click is just default, right? So again, like with your arrow keys or your mouse click, you can move back and forth, but you could set after, and what it'll do is after 60 seconds or whatever amount you set, it will transition the slide automatically. Like it'll go to the next slide, which I believe we do touch on, but that's just something worth mentioning right now. So we can also add a sound. Um, so we want to select the slide with the transition we want to modify. We can click the sound drop down menu in the timing group. We can click a sound and apply it to the selected slide and sort of preview it to see whether we like it or not and sort of hear the sound. But again, arguably, I think sounds might be slightly more annoying than uh, like very involved transitions, right? So you do just want to make sure that these sounds are used in moderation, right? Um, because it can get very overwhelming or possibly very annoying for an individual looking at your slideshow, right? Very distracting. So that's why you do want to make sure that you use them sparingly and the context sort of makes sense, right? But let's see if I can show an example. I just need to check the audio so it doesn't blow out our ears. Worst case, I'll crop it. That's not an issue at all. But let's just go sound. Let's go. Let's just do applause since I think it'll be. Is very loud. So I will make a change, don't worry, it won't blow out your eardrums. I just have to make a note of that when I'm editing uh, the lectures, right? But yeah, that's how you add it. I apologize if it's very distorted or unclear, but that's how you sort of make that change there. Now we can also remove a transition. Say maybe we think it's too much or we don't need it, we don't want it. We just select the slide we want to remove, then click none from the transition to the slide group, and the transition will be removed. To remove all transitions from all slides, apply the none transition to a slide and then click apply to all. So again, let's just remove everything. So let's go none and then apply to all right here. As you can see, the star did disappear. So again, let's just show you here. Sorry about the audio. And then we could just sort of go to none, and we look at the stars here. Once we click apply to all of them disappear, which effectively removes our transitions, right? Which is good. You don't want too much transitions, and sometimes you want to apply a blanket change to transitions and whatnot as well. It's another thing to consider. One thing to note as well, we could probably add our own audio as well if we go other sound, and then sort of it opens up sort of a menu, right? Yeah, so we could also possibly like add a new video, or sorry, add a new sound as well, should we want to do that. Just by going to other sound, it'll open up your file explorer, and then from there you could sort of add whatever you'd like, right, sound wise. But that's pretty good, pretty straightforward there. Now we're talking about advancing slides. So this is a pretty important slide, and mainly because normally in slideshow view, you would advance to the next slide by clicking your mouse or by pressing the spacebar or arrow keys on your keyboard. The advanced slide setting in sort of our timing group allows the presentation to advance on its own and display each slide for a specific amount of time. This feature is especially useful for unattended presentations, such as those at a trade show booth, right? So like say like, okay, like maybe we don't want to actively be presenting, right? But we do want a slideshow to go. We could advance them automatically, and to sort of advance slides automatically, all we need to do is select the slide we want to modify, locate the timing group on the transitions tab, then under advanced slide, uncheck the box next to on mouse click. In the after field, enter the amount of time you want to display the slide. In this example, we'll advance the slide automatically after 1 minute 15 seconds or 1150. You can select another slide and then repeat the process until all slides sort of have the timing, right? So this is if certain slides have a different amount of content, and say you test yourself like rehearsing, and you're like, okay, well this slide takes 2 minutes to mention all the points, this one takes 1 minute 15, then you can sort of set up your own individual advanced slide timing for each option, right? But also for some, if you're just like, okay, like I'm presenting and every slide's generally going to be on a minute, it shouldn't be too long, then you can apply that to all your slides, right? And have it just advance automatically for you if you ever exceed that minute length, right? And then you can, as leading into that directly, if we need to advance to the next slide before an automatic transition, of course, you can always click the mouse or press the space bar to advance the slides as normal. That's completely fine. That's not an issue, right? But again, it is just for those situations in which, like, okay, you need an automated sort of next slide option, right? So let's just quickly just discuss that. Again, right, you could just select one, click select, and then it'll advance after that set time. So now we're talking about managing slides, right? So as we add more slides to a presentation, it can be difficult to keep everything organized, right? Rightfully so, because sometimes the slideshows legitimately get there in length, right? You could be pushing 100 to 200 slides easily, right? Thankfully for us, PowerPoint does offer tools to help organize and prepare the slideshow. So about slide views, PowerPoint includes several slide views, which are all useful for various tasks. The slide view commands are located in the bottom right of the PowerPoint window, which is something we've mentioned. And there are sort of 4 main slide views. So we have the normal view. So this is the default view where we create and edit slides. We can also move in slides in the slide navigation pane on the left. We also have the slide sorter view. So in this view, we can see a thumbnail version of each slide, and we can drag and drop slides to sort of reorder them quickly, right? We have reading view, which, and this is stuff we've already shown, but this view fills the PowerPoint window with the preview of your presentation. It includes easily accessible navigation buttons at the bottom right. Finally, we have slideshow view. So this is the view we'll use to present to an audience, and the command will begin the presentation from the current slide. And we can also press F5 on our keyboard to start from the beginning. A menu will appear in the bottom left corner when we move the mouse, and these commands will allow you to navigate through the slides and access other features such as the pen or the lighter. So again, let's just take a quick look. So this is a normal view. This is slide sorter view, so as you can see, you can sort of organize your slides. Then we have reading view. Sorry about the audio. Hopefully it's not too loud. But like we have reading view. And then finally we have presentation view, which is just what it looks like when we present a slideshow, right? So there's that. Yeah. Now we have the outline view. So the outline view shows our slide text in outline form. This allows us to quickly edit our slide text and view multiple contents of slides at once. We can use this layout to review the organization of our slideshow and prepare to deliver a presentation. All right, so to view an outline, we go to the View tab, click the Outline View command, then the outline of your slide text will appear in the navigation pane. Then we can type directly in the outline and make changes to our slide text. So again, we can go to View, Outline, then we'll see like our slides along with text that our slides have, and then we can always make changes. So this was added from the outline view, right? It is a pretty good example, for sort of presentation rehearsal, right? It's very good for sort of, again, just reading through your points at a high level, and sort of ensuring that, okay, this is definitely what I want to say, this is definitely helpful, that sort of thing, right? So it is useful to use the outline view, especially if you are an avid presenter. You could use it as sort of like a coach or even just a rehearsal system, right? Even for editing, sometimes just by looking at the slide, you might be distracted and lose focus of what you want to change. Whereas here, if you have it here, you could sort of, it's easier to read your title and your slide content, which subsequently makes it much, much easier to also make changes should we need to, right? So that's another thing worth considering, right? Let me just move my chair back up. I realized I drifted a little bit further back. But yeah, now we have slide notes. Okay, so this is sort of a feature that I sort of realized among my class was like almost underutilized, as if like a lot of individuals did not know what this feature does. So if we were to guess, what's the value in using slide notes, everyone? What do slide notes do for a user? Well, again, this is a bit of a longer question. We'll give it 2 minutes and 30 seconds. But what do we think the purpose of the slide notes function is, everyone? What do we think? Why is it important? Why did Microsoft put it in? Why do a lot of users derive a lot of value from it, everyone? What do we think? Why is the slide notes feature so important? What do we think? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? you think, everyone? What's sort of the value of the slide notes feature? What do you think, everyone? Well, so the slide notes is honestly a very, very important feature of PowerPoint, but it's honestly very, very underutilized from what I've seen, right? A lot of users don't really know too much about it or don't really extract the most, but basically it's sort of a tool to help you present, right? So typically when you're presenting, you might have what we call the presenter view, right? And basically your slide notes appear there, right? So basically, it's a way of sort of guiding your slide presentation without having any visual cues show on the screen, right? So think of it as the PowerPoint equivalent of having like, uh, I guess, notes written on a cue card or a speech written on paper. It. Sort of works very similarly, if I were to describe it, right? And it honestly is very helpful. So we can add notes to our slides from the notes pane, and they're often called speaker's notes, and they can help you deliver or prepare for the presentation, right? So let me just give an example of like how you could use it. So let's say in the notes section, um, we add, okay, let's say our slides about like the business report, and you're like, okay, in the notes you could be like, mention 13% statistic about our profit, right? Mention that our growth is projected to slow down, that sort of thing, like little cues or notes to help you present that you could throw there, right? And how do we open it up? Well, we click the notes command at the bottom of the screen to open the notes pane. We can click and drag the edge of the pane to resize it if desired. And then we can click on the notes pane and begin typing to add notes. We can also access the notes page view to edit and review our notes. Just click the notes page command from the view tab. Then from here you can type notes in the text box below. Right, so let's just show you. Let me show you an example. Let's just go to normal view, right? So we can already see the notes here, but we can also pop them in and out, right? And then are my slide notes. Things to mention. So we can do it like this. Mention slide notes. Mention that they are great. That sort of thing, right? So we can expand this as well, right? Let's just put these, right? So these are good to know. And sort of like if we, let me see if I can show it. Let's go to, so, I don't know why presenter view isn't showing, but typically in presenter view, you can sort of see your notes, right? And then the notes will help you sort of, no, it doesn't show speaker notes for it right now, but it typically will show you the notes, and you can sort of, I guess, have a more structured presentation, or you can include things you forget. But they are very, very helpful tools that sort of help you deliver your presentation with more ease, more clarity, right? And we'll try to include a video in sort of the resources section to ensure that you can see some really good applications of it, right? But yeah, and we also have slide sections. So if we do have a lot of slides, we can sort of organize them into sections to make our presentation much easier to navigate, right? And sections can be expanded in the slide navigation pane and named for easy reference, right? To create slide sections, in our example, we'll add two sections. So let's say one for dogs that are available for option and another available for cats. So we select our slide, right? And then we, on the home tab, we go to section and click add section. Then we'll get an untitled section up here. Then we can rename it by clicking on section and then renaming it, right? And then type your new section name and then repeat to any section that you want or any one you're working on. Then in the slide navigation pane, click the arrow next to a section name to collapse or expand it. Then to remove a section, we can click the remove section command. And we can also click remove all sections to remove all sections from our slides. Now, the question is, everyone, how do I say this? Sorry, I'm thinking. Okay, so we've already gone through an example of a section, but what are some other sort of potential use cases of this section, right? Sort of, what are some examples that we can think of um, that sort of that we would need sections for, everyone? What are some examples of sections? Again, this is a smaller sort of question, so we'll give it like 1.5 to 2 minutes. But what are some other examples of sections that we can make, everyone? What do we think? Really think about it, right? Think about what sections are and what we've defined them as. So then, knowing that, what situations do you think sections would be particularly helpful, everyone? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? What do we think? All right. So, what do we think? Some slide sections. Let me give one example. This slideshow, right? I'm going like I break in sort of sections of like text basics, slide basics, right? And I could use sort of a slide section to sort of organize that, right? And create a visual sort of reminder that, okay, this is what I'm discussing here, this is what I'm discussing here, right? Even for, say, business, right? Let's say you're doing a business report. Maybe certain sections of the business report are sort of separated and condensed. So that's another example, right? Um, and is it too important to use? Not really, but if you do value organization or you're working with a really large presentation that involves a lot of different um, areas and sections, I do recommend using slide sections because frankly, they are very helpful. They reduce ambiguity, right? and it generally makes it much easier to do what you need to do. So let's just look at sort of slide section. So let's go here, let's go to home, let's do add section, right? So this section here will be second section, right? So everything, I spelled that wrong, but yeah, if you want to rename it, so you can unselect or deselect it, you can right click and click rename here. So I misspelled it on purpose, totally didn't misspell it the first time. Or you could go here, I believe, and rename if you want as well, right? And you also have other, like remove all sections, remove this, or remove a section, collapse all, expand all, right? And then again, just to create a new one, like this default section, because you created one, it'll open a default, so you could just say first section. Oops. First section, that's good there, right? And we can do it here. And then again, just commands like we could collapse all, expand all, that sort of thing, right? All right, moving on to our let's try section. All right, so let's get into our let's try section, right? So as you can see, we have a much nicer sort of slideshow here, very nice theming, nice template, whatever, right? So let's say the first question is, at the top, we want to create a new section, right? We want to create a new slide section, right? And we want to name it introduction. How do we go about doing so, everyone? How would we do that? How would we create a new section titled introduction, everyone? We'll give it 2 minutes for everyone to try it, but how would we go about doing that, everyone? What do we think? How could we create a new section and then name it introduction? How do we go about doing so, everyone? How could we do that? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? What do we think? Well, if we remember, very easy. Home tab, new section, we can add a section, right? And then we can add the name. Introduction. Perfect, right? Of course, we could right click and sort of rename section, or I believe what we can do is sort of also just in between and then add a section. Cool. Now we need to go to man's best friend, right? And let's create one named dog. So let's just go section, add section, and then go dogs, right? Rename. Cool. Let's go to little things in life. Let's make another section again. Go to homepage, slides, and then section, and then go cats and others, right? Cool. Now, let's just look at our slide here. Let's look at our slide Okay, well, Pogo is a dog, clearly, right? But it doesn't match sort of our introduction slides. So clearly this isn't here. So now, how do I move this slide, so Pogo's slide, so that it's in the dog section, everyone? How would we go about doing so? How could we make that change? This is a bit easier. We'll give it a minute and a half. But how could we go about doing so, everyone? How could we do that? What do we think? What do we think? All right, we're back. So how do we do it? Well, we just, again, just remember, we can click on our slide and just move it down, right? Pretty straightforward there. Now, if I want to change it to sort of outline view, right? If I want to change my slide to outline view, how could I go about doing so? How could I change the view of my slideshow, everyone? How could I do that? Again, this is a shorter one, so we'll give it sort of another minute, minute and a half, but how could I go about changing my view to outline view? How could I do that, everyone? How could I go about doing so? How could I do that? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? Well, if we want to change to outline view, again, we go here, right? Hopefully my camera's on. And then this is side shorter. Well, no, it's not here. Trick question, right? Hopefully you didn't fall for it, but it's the view, outline view, right? So then we can see sort of, our slide breakdown, right? So like a little bit of text here, right? Another thing here that we can make quick edits to, that sort of thing, right? If we remember. Now we want to create a note on slide 4, right? So let's just go back to normal view. A note that says move before, oh wait, we can do this on the outline view actually. Let's go to slide 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we want to add a note. Well, how do we do that? We can just add a note here. Move before slide 3 or delete. Right, cool. That's great. And let's switch back to normal mode. Again, you just go to view, normal mode. Right. I guess a final transition, and this is a multi sort of stepped question, so we'll give it I think 3 to 4 minutes. Um, so basically, what we want to do is, let's say we want to put one exciting effect, or one exciting, sorry, transition to all our slides, and we want to sort of have all our slides progress after 15 seconds. And we want the duration of our transition to last 2 seconds. How would we go about doing so? So again, we want to apply one exciting transition to all our slides, have the duration of that transition be 1.5 seconds, and then have every slide automatically advance every 15 seconds, everyone. How would we go about doing so? How could we do that? So this is a longer question, so I will give it 3 to 4 minutes for everyone to solve. But again, the question is, I want to apply an exciting transition to all slides, or like one with a lot of movement. I want each transition to be clocked at 1.5 seconds. And finally, I want each slide to automatically progress at um, at 15 seconds. So how would I go about doing so, everyone? How could I do that? How do I go about doing so? How could I do that? What do we think, everyone? How would we do that? I know it's a lot of steps, so that's why I'm giving 4 and a bit minutes for you to break it down step by step, but how would we go about doing so? And if you have it in front of you, try to give it a try. If you have it open in front of you. What do we think? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? How, again, just to repeat, we want to add one exciting transition to all our slides, have those transitions have a duration of 1.5 seconds, and we want our slides to auto advance after 15 seconds. How would we go about doing so? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? right, well, let's look through this. So again, transitions, hopefully it is exciting. It is exciting. So let's do something like curtains, okay? We want our duration not 6 seconds. Let's just change it to 1.5 seconds. So we go to timing, duration 1.5 seconds, right? And sort of, let's go 15 seconds, right? So after, and then apply to all, right? So hopefully, yeah, as we can see, it applies to every slide, which is exactly what we're looking for. So that's perfect, right? And sort of that is sort of managing slides. Um, and hopefully that was very helpful. I think by this point, you have a basic sort of understanding of PowerPoint so that if someone asks you to create a PowerPoint, you could probably do it at a decently high level, right? So that's perfect, right? But as we'll see, there's a lot more complexity and sort of room to grow in PowerPoint, and potentially there's a lot we have left to learn, right? So that's sort of the end of this Let's Try section. Moving on. All right, so the next sort of section we're going to touch on is sort of one about finding and replacing, right? And perhaps you remember this from sort of the Word module, right? But find and replace is actually a fairly, I guess, important sort of feature function of, I guess, in Word, but also by extension, it would also be equally as important in PowerPoint, right? With that said, right, what do we think sort of, I guess, the purpose or the usefulness of find and replace? Well, we'll make this a two-part question because this is what the whole section is going to be about. So I do think we want to sort of knowledge check ourselves to see where we stand out knowledge-wise, right? And so I guess the question is, one moment, I'm running out of space. All right, where were we? I believe we were discussing the find and replace feature, right? And sort of, I guess, its purpose along with sort of, one moment, there we go, along with sort of what situations it could be useful for. So we'll give it 2 to 3 minutes for everyone to really think about it. But what do we think what do we think find and replace does? And what are some potential use cases or examples of it? Again, oh, whoops, already advanced the slide. So we'll just completely throw that out. So basically, when working with longer presentations, it is difficult and time consuming to locate a specific word or phrase. And PowerPoint can automatically search your presentation using the find feature. It also allows us to quickly change words or phrases using the replace feature. To find text from the Home tab, we click the Find command. Then a dialog box will appear. Enter the text we want to find in the Find What field, then click Find Next. If the text is found, it will be selected, and we can also access the Find command by pressing Ctrl F on our keyboard, right? So, given this find sort of feature, this description, right? Again, let's bridge this into a question. What are some situations in which we think this could be useful, everyone? What do we think? What are some situations in which the sort of, I guess, find feature could be used for? What do we think? We'll give it 2 minutes, everyone. Let's think about it. What are like some actual specific situations that we can use find for? What do we think? What do you think, everyone? What do we think, everyone? What do we think, everyone? Well, I have some, whoops, let me turn this on. I have some examples, right? Let's say we're working on a slideshow, and let's say an individual that we name, like say we put someone's last name in, let's say we've misspelt that last name, right? So let's say we've misspelt it, but we've done it on multiple slides. What we could do is we could find sort of, by typing in the misspelling, we could click on the find or control F, and sort of find every instance where it's been misspelled, right? And then this also plays directly into sort of the replace feature, where we can then replace all of these incorrect spellings with a more correct version all at the same time. So again, let's go back to our slide here, and let's go to find, which let me just verify it's in the find. It is on the home tab. Right here. So find, and then we could just do text. Right, and obviously it's highlighted, but if you have multiple sort of over the course of your presentation, you could find it there, right? Or you can press Control F as well. That's another common way of using the find, right? A lot of individuals actually are just used to the Control F command, so you could also use that. Now we're talking about replacing. So again, if we've repeatedly made a mistake throughout our presentation, like misspelling someone's name, or that we need to exchange a particular word or phrase for another, we can use the replace feature to make quick revisions. From the home tab, click the replace command. A dialog box will appear, and then type the text you want to find in the find what field. Then you type the text you want to replace it with in the replace with field, then click find next. If the text is found, it will be selected. Review the text to make sure you want to replace it. If you want to replace it, select one of the replace options. Replace will replace individual instances, and replace all will replace every instance. In our example, we'll use the replace option, and the selected text will be replaced, and PowerPoint will move to the next instance of the text in the presentation. And when we're finished replacing text, simply just click close to exit. Right. So again, let's just say replace it with book, right? And we can just click replace, right? And it'll replace, right? Alternatively, if you want to replace all, you could also do that. Pretty straightforward and easy in that regard. Perfect. We're talking about printing. So even though PowerPoint presentations are designed to be viewed, there are many sort of instances in which you would want to print them, right? And then we can even print sort of custom versions of a presentation, right? Which can be especially helpful when presenting our slideshow. And the print pane does make it easy to preview and print our presentation, right? So we have several different sort of print layouts to choose from when printing a presentation. The layout you choose will mostly depend on why you're printing the slideshow. There are 4 types of print layouts. So we have full page slides, so this prints a full page for each slide in our presentation, and this layout is the most useful if we need to review or edit a printed copy of our presentation. We also have notes pages, and this prints each slide along with any speaker notes you have for your slide, right? If you've included sort of a lot of notes for each slide, you could get a printed copy of notes with you, right? So you can have them as you sort of present, right? So regardless of which sort of format you choose, you should know that you can make sort of physical copies of your presentation. Well, you might be wondering, okay, but why would I ever print a PowerPoint presentation? But in all honesty, there are a lot of situations in which that would be a great thing to do. And then with that, we know that, okay, we have like two formats. So we have like full page slides along with sort of notes pages. Now, I guess the question ultimately is, or not what it ultimately is, but the question is, do we remember how to access the print pane, everyone? So I'll give it 2 to 2.5 to maybe 3 minutes to really think about this. But we did touch on it briefly in the beginning of class. But how do we go about accessing the print pane that this mentions after everyone? How do we go about doing so? How would we do that? How would we access the print pane? What do you think? What do we think, everyone? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? How do we access the print pane? What do you think, everyone? All right, let's flip back. Well, if you remember, what we can do is we can, sorry about the banging, we can go to our backstage view and then to the print pane, right? Then here's our print pane. And, you know, we can always sort of print our slides, and these are some sort of settings, sorry. Like these are settings we can have our different printing outcomes, right? So obviously, we can also print out an outline, so an overall outline of our slideshow. Again, we could do this to sort of review an organization of your slideshow and prepare to deliver your presentation. Alternatively, we could also do handouts, which honestly were very, very useful. In like elementary school, teachers would print this out, but these print thumbnail versions of each slide with optional space for notes. This layout is especially useful if you want to give your audience a physical copy of the presentation, and the optional spacing allows them to take notes, right? In terms of the outline, you don't necessarily have to print them. You could actually save these as a document, and a lot of individuals don't know this, right? But if we want to, instead of printing something, we can sort of print to a file, I believe, right? I believe where's the outputs? I can't remember what it was, but there is a way to print it as sort of an item, right? Alternatively, you can print it to like OneNote as well, right? Or like print to PDF, there it is, right? So if we print, it'll open up our sort of file explorer, and then we can save it as a PDF file as opposed to sort of just to our printer, right? Another thing, like we can go to a notes page, right? We could do an outline, so this is also very, very useful to save. We also have like different versions of handouts, like 2 slides per page, and really sky's the limit, right? But now we can see that sort of printing is a multi-dimensional thing. Like it's not just like, I guess, relatively linear for the lack of a better term. There is a lot of freedom and customizability we can give ourselves with this, right? All right. So moving on. I also apologize for my chair creaking. It's never done that. I don't know why it's doing it now, but okay. So again, to access the print pane, as we say, go to the File tab. A backstage view will appear. We select Print, and the print pane will appear. Then we choose the desired printer and print range. Then we choose the desired print layout and color settings, and when we're done, click Print. And then once we're presenting a slideshow. So once our slideshow is complete, you'll need to learn how to present it to an audience. And PowerPoint offers several tools and features to help make your presentation smooth, engaging, and professional. Before presenting your slideshow, you'll need to think about the type of equipment that will be available for your presentation. Many presenters use projectors during presentations, so you might want to consider using one as well. This allows you to control and preview slides on a monitor while presenting them to an audience on sort of another screen, right? So to start a slideshow, there are multiple ways to sort of start. We can click on the Start from Beginning command on the Quick Access toolbar, or press the F5 key at the top of our keyboard. Or we can go to the Slideshow View command at the bottom of the PowerPoint window to begin a presentation from the current slide. And then go to the Slideshow tab and on the ribbon to access additional options. From here, you can start the presentation and access advanced presentation options. We also have sort of additional slideshow commands, right? So in regard to commands, once we're presenting, we'll see like a little sort of translucent set of options, right? And we can click on sort of the 3 dots for options, right? You can advance to the next slide by clicking your mouse or pressing the space bar on your keyboard. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move forward or backward through the presentation. And to stop a slideshow, you can exit presentation mode by pressing that escape key on your keyboard. You can also click the slideshow options button in the bottom left and select End Show, right? So there also are some additional options. So let's try to go over this really quick. So let's go back here. Let's just sorry about the audio there. Hopefully it didn't too loud. I will edit it though. You know what? I should probably remove that really quick. So how do we do that? Again, transitions, and then we could go none, apply to all, and then it's gone, right? It is not gone. Let's go no sound. So we take the sound off and apply to all. Right, so we go here, right, and we can see that, oh, I block it. One moment, let me move this. right here. Hopefully you can see it. I'll move my camera back, but hopefully you can see it. And we have sort of end show. We have camera settings, subtitle settings, arrow options. We can choose our screen. We can also show presenter view. So this is what I was referring to. Okay, let me see if I can move it into the other screen, hopefully. I can. So this is what I was referring to when I mentioned sort of presenter's view. So basically, it's sort of view that's typically hidden from the user if you're working on another monitor, right? And you can sort of see what slide is coming up next, your current slide, along with the notes you've sort of saved as well, right? So again, this helps you sort of really be a better presenter and get what you need to do done, right? So we also have like a laser pointer, right? You can also like have a pen to underline things, right? Highlighter, all that, right? So that's a setting. We can see all slides, zoom in, black or unblack, right? So if we want to do a transition or we're doing a discussion session. We also have subtitles. Now, I wonder if these show, which they will. It is slightly delayed, probably because I'm using OBS, or another recording software on top. But as you can see, it does work pretty well there. And then obviously we have the webcam, which is on for the recording software. Then additional sort of settings there, right? But pretty useful, I'd say, for presenting. Lots of flexibility that it provides you, and honestly, most presenters don't know about these features, which I think is odd. I think you should definitely know them because they honestly provide a lot of value to a lot of individuals, right? And we're talking about presentation tools and features, which we did just show, but it provides a lot of tools that we can use while presenting our slideshow. So for example, we can change our mouse pointer to a pen or a highlighter to draw attention to items in our slides. In addition, we can also jump around to slides from a presentation or access other programs from our taskbar if we need. We can also show the taskbar, so sometimes maybe you need to sort of change to a video, right, that sort of thing. And you can do that pretty easily by allowing access to our taskbar. So again, by going to slide options, right? Then go to show taskbar. Our taskbar will then appear, and then as you can see in this example, we're navigating to sort of a video, right? We also have additional slide options, right? So if we right click on this, we could go next, last viewed, see all slides, zoom in, show presenter view. And then to sort of skip a non-adjacent slide, we could jump to slides out of order. So we locate the see all slides and button in the bottom left corner. Then we'll get thumbnail versions of each slide, right? And then select the slide you want to jump to, and the selected slide will appear, right? So how do we do that? And then right here, right? Pretty easy, pretty useful. Yeah, so that's pretty great. There's a lot of different settings to make your presentation the best. Obviously, in all honesty, a lot of people, in my opinion, don't know about these features, which I think it really is a shame because the overall experience of using PowerPoint increases tenfold if you know these, right? I will say a lot of seasoned sort of PowerPoint users are very familiar with these, but to those who use it casually or semi-frequently, they may not really know, right? So that is another thing to mention. We can also access drawing tools, right? So as I had mentioned, your mouse pointer can sort of act as a pen or highlighter to draw attention to things in your slides. And we can do this by locating and selecting the pen tools button in our bottom left corner. Then we select a pen or highlighter based on our preference, right? Or we can choose another color, which is something I showed. All you need to do is click and drag your mouse to mark your slides. You can also use Control P on our keyboard to access the pen tool, right? And we can also use a laser pointer to sort of bring attention to certain things. Obviously, it won't leave markings. And to use the laser pointer, select it from pen tools, hold the Control key and the left mouse button. Another thing to note is that the pen features, like let's say you're a math professor and you're breaking down complex proofs, meaning you're writing out math problems or whatever, right? You don't have to use your mouse. In fact, a lot of them just use a pen like this for a digital sort of device. and let's say they have sort of a touch screen or some sort of tablet that allows them to sort of record drawing inputs, these would work very well as well. Of course, I don't have sort of a drawing tablet or anything in front of me right now where I can draw my slides, nor do I need to, but that's just one thing worth mentioning. We can also erase all ink markings. So let's say we've made our annotations, whatever, and we want to remove them. What we can do is we can erase all the ink on slide or use an eraser, right? And then when we end a slideshow, we do have the option to keep or discard any ink annotations made during your presentation, right? If we keep ink markings, they'll appear as objects on your slides in normal view, so they will save to your slides. So for example, let's say you're a professor, again, let's do the math example, and you're going over math examples in class, and you're doing the answers on blank slides. What you could do is you could keep the ink annotations and then post your slides just so the students have sort of references for how these problems were solved, right? That was an issue I had in sort of university, in which like a professor would be breaking down complex like math equations and whatnot. But the thing is, when they actually came around to posting their slides, they just posted a blank slide because they did not keep their annotations. So it was very, very hard to go back and relook at these equations if you didn't keep sort of any notes yourself, right? So that's also pretty useful. Again, if you are sort of doing some sort of drawing, some sort of pen recordings, right, it's useful. Even the laser pointer, if you want to draw attention to certain things, you can do that. As I mentioned, you can also get physical laser pointers that as well, right, for sort of presenting, if you do also want to do that. They're not particularly uncommon. I don't know how much so anymore. I don't know if there's a lot of in-person presentations occurring, but yeah, it's just worth mentioning. Now we also have presenter view, which I did show. Think of it like if you're presenting a slideshow, let's say a second display, like a projector, we can use presenter view. So as I shown, like I have my main monitor here, then I have another monitor to the left in which like I see all the recordings things. That's why you see me look over there. But if I have a setup like that, on the other screen, so in this case on my left side here, because my monitor's here, right? We'll get the presenter view open up, right? So you'll have a special set of controls along with sort of a very good view at your slideshow that your audience doesn't see. So we can reference slide notes, we can get a preview of the upcoming slide, right, along with the current slide, and any laser pointer or any sort of settings like that as well. In order to access presenter view, we start our slideshow as normal. Then as we'd shown in our example, we click on the three dots, right, and go show presenter view, or we can press Alt F5, right? So let's just go here. Let's press Alt F5. Does it do anything? Okay, it doesn't do anything here, but if I click this, show presenter view, it opens up on sort of my left side here. Hopefully you can see that. We already saw this, so it's nothing too crazy. But again, just worth showing for the sake of an example. Now we have slideshow options. So again, there are a lot of options for setting up and playing a slideshow. For example, you can set up an unintended presentation that can be displayed at a kiosk and make your slideshows show repeat and continuous looping. In order to access slideshow options, we select the slideshow tab, then click the setup slideshow command. The setup slideshow or setup show dialog box will appear. Then from here, we can select the desired options for our presentation. To advance slides automatically, we'll need to customize the slide timing on transitions, right? So this is something we did do or go over. Let's go here, right? So let's go slideshow, right? Then we'll go setup slideshow, right? And then here we get our settings like presented by speaker full screen or browse at a kiosk, individual, then loop continuously until escape, show without narration, without animation, right? Pen color, laser pointer, all that, right? So again, a very diverse set of skills and sort of settings that you could use to just have great presentations. And now let's get into our Let's Try section. All right, everyone. We are now back to our let's try section, right? And in this case, the let's try section really revolves around sort of the presentation features we just spent a while discussing, right? And this one should be a little bit shorter, I believe. Um, but sure. So I guess the question ultimately is, first, how do I sort of get my presentation from this format that we see in front of us? What are the different ways that we can get it to sort of be in quote unquote presentation mode, right? So how do we get to that point, everyone? How could we go about doing so? Um, like, how could we do that? And now, this is sort of simpler question, so I'll give it 2 minutes. But how do we actively present our presentation so we don't see all this stuff? We see it as if we're about to present. How would we go about doing so, everyone? How would we do that? How could we do so? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? How would we sort of get ready, or how would we prep our slide so that we are ready to present, everyone? What do we think? Well, how do we do it? Well, there are multiple ways to sort of do this, right? So let's look. We can go here, and this starts from beginning, or we can press the F5 button. Alternatively, you could also add more to the quick access toolbar. And we can also go slideshow, and then from beginning, from current slide, and we have sort of additional options, right? So let's just go from beginning. Cool. Now we're here. Let's see if it's opened up. It has not opened up presenter view. So does anyone remember how we could open up presenter view, right? And sort of advance to slide 8 efficiently, right? And this is a longer sort of question. So we'll give it 3 minutes for you to think about this. But right now, we only see our main screen. And because I do have 2 monitors, technically, we can open presenter view, right? Obviously, I'll move it to the main monitor so everyone can see it. But how would I open up presenter view, everyone? How would I open up presenter view and then navigate to slide 8? How would I go about doing so, everyone? How could we do that, right? And if you're following along, as in not with this specific sort of slide, but with even any slideshow, right? Please do give it a try. Try to open up the presenter view on your own. Again, the question is, how do we open up presenter view? And then how do we navigate to slide 8 from the presenter view, everyone? How would we go about doing so? How could we do so, everyone? What do we think? What do we think? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? How would I go about opening presenter view, and then how could I navigate to slide 8 from the presenter view? Do we remember? What do we think? What do we think? What do we think? Well, if you remember, we can, oh, I don't know if you'll see it. Let me just move my camera again. There we go. You can see it, right? And then here, and we can click Show Presenter View. So one moment, let me move my camera back and move this into the other window. Like that. Let me just move my camera back. And now look. Okay. So we can go to slide 8. Well, how do we do that? Well, there are multiple ways to sort of do it. Either works. You can manually sort of flick through, but all you need to know is that your sort of audience is viewing these like flipping slides, right? So you could argue that from a viewing perspective, this is like generally not the greatest option to sort of follow, right? Because it can be perceived as annoying. But what we can do is we can just click on this here, which allows us to see all slides, and then quickly just tab to 8, right? And now, again, how do we use the pen tool, right? We just use the pen tool, clicking here, and then let's just circle this, right? And just circle, there we go, right? Like that. We also have live captions, so obviously it's listening, if we remember. It is delayed, but again, we can just looking at these captions, they are relatively accurate, sorry, which is very, very interesting. Right, so you can do that. Alternatively, there are different sort of things like black screen, white screen, show hiding ink, showing the taskbars. That's also, remember how we mentioned it, like if I want to show a YouTube video, I could do that. And we can just click end show and discard the annotations. So that was really the basics of presenting. Again, nothing too complex, I'd say generally, but it is something that I do believe would pay massive dividends, especially knowing about the presenter view and sort of the value it gets there. Is something, again, just really important. Moving on. So in this next section, we are going to be discussing sort of lists, right? And lists are honestly very important when it comes to PowerPoint, right? Intuitively. And I believe we have I apologize again for the creaking of the chair. But we are very, very familiar with sort of lists, right? Hopefully. We've touched on them in Word, I believe, right? And it's just as useful there, if not more useful, in PowerPoint than it is in Word, right? And as we know, or may not know, sort of lists are a very, very important part of PowerPoint presentations, right? Why? Because again, think back to what I mentioned about sort of PowerPoint being a very visual medium in which we need to take a lot of text or information and condense it in sort of a palatable format. Well, you might be wondering, okay, well, where does this palatable format, how is it typically sort of, I guess, formatted for lack of a better term? How is our text formatted? Well, lucky for us in PowerPoint, we primarily tend to use lists, right? And why are lists very important? Well, it's because it makes your slides sort of much, much easier for your audience to read, right? One of the most common ways of doing this is to format the text as a bulleted or numbered list, right? Um, Now, the question is, and I really, really want you to think about this because this may influence the way you do sort of presentations. But why do we think bullet points work so well, right? Why is sort of bullet points the de facto or the go-to sort of option for organizing information in a slide? Why not another format, everyone? What do we think? We'll give it 2 minutes for this question. But let's really think about it, right? Because by understanding this, um, it makes it a lot easier to understand how PowerPoints work. But what do we think? Um, why bulleted sort of lists? Why do we think that's important, everyone? What do we think? What do we think? Like, why do we use them in PowerPoints and whatnot? What do we think, everyone? What do we think? Why why lists? Okay, so um, if we look, right, it's because if we look at this, right, or even if we thought about it, the answer is first off, it creates a level of visual hierarchy in our sort of presentation, right? So what does that mean, right? Well, it's very easy to create sort of separation between points, right? And let's just show you an example. Oh, I don't have PowerPoint open. Let's just open PowerPoint, right? But let's just show sort of the visual hierarchy, right? So let's go here, right? So this is one big sort of difference, right? Because now we have a visual hierarchy, right? And we can sort of organize our thoughts in a separated format, right? So that's really, really big because as I mentioned, PowerPoint is inherently a very, very sort of visual format, right? So introducing the notion of sort of visual hierarchy is honestly extremely, extremely important, right? And having that separation between points. Because if you think about it, if you just have like, let's do this. This is much, much harder, right, to read because there's not really much of a separation, right? They're all squeezed together. It might be a little bit harder to stand or understand, but look, with this we have that sort of visual hierarchy, and also these bullets, right? They draw a audience member's attention to them, right? So they act as an anchor for your sort of note or thing you want to mention, right? And that's why it's so prevalent and important to use bullet points, because again, it's a very organized way of conveying condensed information, right? Um, which is honestly what we want when we're making a presentation. A lot of individuals flood, maybe like put like walls of text on their presentation, but that's not the best approach, right? Because then it gets confusing. You might distract your audience members. Your audience members may lose a little bit of focus, right? Which is why we use the bullet format again, right? Because again, there's separation, so audience members can go from point to point. It's a great way of visual hierarchy, right? And it lends itself very nicely to short bursts of text, right? Making them more readable and whatnot as compared to sort of individual paragraph by paragraph basis, right? So by default, when we type text into a placeholder, a bullet is placed at the beginning of each paragraph. And if we want, we can modify a list by choosing a different bullet style or by switching to a numbered list, right? So that's another important distinction to mention, that we can change the bullet style, but we can also do a numbered list, right? Now, okay, we have another sort of piggyback question here. In the context of a presentation, what are some use cases for a numbered list? Like, why would the numbered list be so important to someone? Like, why would we ever want to use sort of a numbered list in sort of um, why would we want to use a numbered list in sorry, like in a presentation, right? So let's think about that question. Let's give it 2 minutes. But why numbered lists? Why would that help us? How could that potentially help us in the context of our presentation, everyone? What do we think? Why a numbered list? What do we think? Why would we ever want to use a numbered list? What do we think? What do we think? What do we think, everyone? All right, well, let's flick back. Well, numbered lists do sort of come up in a lot of situations in a presentation. Let's say you want to sort of list something in a step-by-step or a procedural format, lists are probably what you're going to end up using, right? Because they denote sort of a clear progression in steps and whatnot, right? Or even if you just want to make different points and you want to sort of, again, maybe have a level of visual hierarchy, or even just make points without like sort of having the boringness of a bullet point, you could also do that, right? But that said, what does this mean? Basically, all this means is that we have numerous sort of options to create bullet points or bullet-esque points. So we have bulleted lists and numbered lists, right? And I really do emphasize like learning, not learning, but like using bulleted and numbered lists as opposed to any other presentation format, because it honestly is the best format for organizing information on sort of a presentation, right? So in order to sort of start a list, again, we can just go to our paragraph in the text box and click on this, which I will show. Now, if we want to change the bullet style, right, we go to the bulleted style dropdown, right, and we have a list of sort of bullets, right, that we can choose from and change. So let's just go through this example. Right, so let's just delete this. Well, first thing, if we want to insert a bulleted list, we can just click on this. We'll just say this is the first point, this is the second point, this is the third point, right? And again, how do we create a bulleted list from scratch? We click on this in the paragraph tab, we just click on this, right? Okay, cool. Now, how do I change? Let's say I don't want like a circle, I want maybe like a square outline. Well, what I do is I highlight, click on this drop down, and let's go here, right? And let's sort of make that change. Now, okay, here's a more advanced question. And this is just for the sake of like, I guess trying to build like logical reasoning and sort of experimentation skills. And we'll give it 3 minutes for this. Okay, so I will give you a hint. In PowerPoint, we do have the ability to add custom bullets, right? So we can do that. And I will go over it, so don't worry. But now I just want to see if we could sort of figure out a process. And obviously, if you have PowerPoint in front of you open right now, I want you to attempt this for yourself and try to figure it out before I explain it. But if we want to create a custom bullet, right, how could we go about doing so, right? And we'll give it 3 minutes for this. But if I want to create a custom bullet, everyone, how could I go about doing so, right? And this is just an opportunity for you to see what you can do before I explain it, right? But again, how would I go about creating a new custom bullet, everyone? We'll give it 3 minutes, but how could I do so? How could I do that? How do we go about doing so? What do we think the process be? Or where would we go? And then from there, what do we think? Even if you don't know, you can definitely uh, just you can definitely just try to discern a little bit, right? And one thing I will say, no trick questions. The answer is right in front of us. Like it's on this screen, or at least a pathway to get to the screen is there, right? So that's one hint. Another hint is it's a set, like, yeah. And then obviously if you have PowerPoint in front of you, I do want you to try this out for yourself and navigate to creating a custom bullet point, but I will explain it even if you can't. But this is where I want everyone to try. And if you don't have it in front of you, I just want you to guess or really think about what you're seeing in front of you right now. What do we think? What do we think? What do we think? do we think, everyone? What do we think? All right, well, let's flick it back. And if you don't know, that's completely fine because I will show you, everyone. And we'll just, obviously, I do believe I have a section set out for this, but let's just show you. So you go to bullets and numbering, and then we see sort of our options. However, we can click customize and sort of create our own custom symbol, right? And we have a lot of typefaces and general things to choose from, and we can select one, then click OK, and then look, we've created a custom bullet point, which we will expand on. So don't you worry. That was just a question to see where we're at and sort of give you an opportunity to sort of try it out yourself and try to emulate a real classroom as much as it is possible, right? Okay. So now, if we want to modify a numbered list, so one thing to note is that in terms of like modifying sort of a bulleted list and a numbered list, or doing anything with a bulleted list or numbered list, typically the processes between the two formats are the same, right? Like it's not too different, um, right? Like if you want to change the number or add a custom numbering scheme, it's the same thing as like a bullet point, right? Because they do mirror each other, right? But again, just like bulleted points, we just click on the numbering drop down, and then we'll have sort of a list of numbering options that we can potentially pull from and use, right? And of course, that solely depends on us, should we want to use it, right? And now to change the starting number, right? So by default, numbered lists count from the number one. However, there are a lot of instances where sometimes you may want to start counting from a different number. Like let's say you started the count on one slide and you're continuing it on the next. You would want to sort of reset the count, right? At some point or to some extent, right? Because maybe you don't want it to say 1, 2, 3, 4 again, because that sort of maybe indicates a different order or set, right? How do we do this? Well, we selected an existing numbered list, right? Then go to the numbering drop down arrow, then select numbering from the menu that appears, and the dialog box will appear, right? And then we could sort of, in the start at field, enter the desired starting number, right? Which is very, very good. Right, so how do we do this? Okay, let's just quickly change this. Let's do something like, let's just do quick numbers. Let's duplicate this. And then let's just delete this and create a numbered list. Actually, we can just use this. Okay, you select it, right? Well, let's go to bullets and numbering, right? And we see right here, start at. So we'll start at 4, not 6, 4. Yep. Cool. And now look, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. So we see how that sort of continues over. Again, let's just say right, fifth or fourth, sorry. Sixth. Right. And now we can sort of see the continuation. One difference from Word is that with Word, when we had a separate set of settings to continue from the previous bulleted list, right? because it would actively automatically recognize that, okay, like we're continuing off the previous number list, so go from 1, 2, 3 to 4, 5, 6, right? We remember that. However, uh, in this case, each slide is, think about it, treated as its own document. So that's why you have to denote what sort of number the count starts at, right? Instead of how like Word would automatically recognize it for us. Not that that's too big a deal. It isn't, right? It's just a little bit more work. But again, we're talking like marginal effort, like a difference of 10 to 15 seconds. So it doesn't, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I wouldn't stress it. It's not that big a deal, right? Now we're talking about modifying the list appearance. So when we're using a bulleted or numbered list, we may want to change its appearance by adjusting the size and color of the bullets or numbers. This can make your list stand out and match the appearance of your presentation, right? Um, okay, cool. So it mentions matching the appearance of our presentation, right? What sorts of things do we think that involves? Well, okay, this is a shorter question, so we'll give it a minute or like a minute and a half to think about it. But nah, actually, I'll just talk about it, right? So we're mentioning sort of matching the appearance of our presentation, right? So this is in relation to theming, right? And sort of modifying our, say, like text size, color, this all factors into overall theming. Why? Because again, theming is a sense of visual identity in a slide. And sort of since bullet points are a pretty important visual aspect of your slides, you do want to make sure that they sort of either blend in with your PowerPoint or they sort of look visually appealing, right? And if you don't care about sort of, how do I say this? Like, I guess the visual aspect of it, right? That's completely fine. But this option is there for individuals that do want to change maybe the overall size of their bullet points and their color, right? So to modify it, again, we did go over this to an extent. So we go on the bulleted tab, select bullets and numbers from the menu that appears. Then we can change the size in the size field, right? So the size field is sort of like just a percentage of text, so it's just as percentage value. And we also have the color drop down box where we can sort of denote a color. Then by clicking OK, we can save it. So let's go here. Let's say I want this green, right? Well, how do, okay, let me just change this to a bullet point. We'll get numbers later, right? But let's go drop down, bullets and numbering, color, let's change it to purple, right? And let's just make it 120, the bullet points. So the bullet points should be 120% of the size of the text. So as you can see, they are much, much larger than the text. But that's how you do it, right? Well, where is this useful, you might be wondering? Isn't black the best color? Yes, black is the best color, I think, in general, right? But if you have a theming in which black maybe doesn't pop out as much, right? Or black doesn't look as good, you obviously do want the option to be able to change the color of your bullets. Another thing, right? So color of your bullets along with size, right? Sometimes you want larger bullet points to really emphasize something or make it like visually distinct. And that's sort of another use case. Now, we're probably going to mention numbers now, right? Well, no, we aren't. Not yet. But like numbers would, I think, express the same way. The only difference is in expressing custom numbers is that I do believe it's just the font now, right? So like font, oh no, sorry, it's still the numbers, right? But again, creating colors, let's do green, right? And now we see, right? That's why it's useful as well, because you can always like sort of make, again, to emphasize sort of the theming, right? Like this green looks nice on the white, or maybe like a blue background or whatever, right? So that's another reason why you might want to sort of change the color on your sort of bulleted points or your number list, right? It is pretty important in that regard. Okay, now we've talked about that. Let's talk about customizing bullets. So this is in relation to what we covered in that little question that we had at the start of class, right? So customizing the look of bullets in our list can help us emphasize certain list items or personalize design of our list. A common way to customize bullets is to use symbols. And to use symbols as a bullet, we select an existing bulleted list, Then on the Home tab, click the Bullets drop-down arrow, select Bullets and Numbering from the menu that appears. A dialog box will appear. Then on the Bulleted tab, we click Customize, and the symbol dialog box will appear. Then we click the Font drop-down box and select a font. And the Wingdig and symbol fonts are good choices because they have a lot of useful symbols. Then we just click OK, right? And then click OK to apply it. So let's just quickly go over this. Let's go here. Let's go bulleted right here. If we remember, bullets numbering. Let's go customize. Let's go Wingdigs. I think it's Wingdigs. Yes, but let's customize it. Let's do an arrow like this. Let's make this arrow yellow. Really bad choice of color. One moment, let me change this. Let's do something orange. Yes, right? And that's how you do that, right? Again, very, very important. And as you can see, it does look very, very nice. It stands out. It's very, very easy to understand, right? Which is great. With all that said, let's move on to our Let's Try section now.